Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Hello again. Welcome back to another episode of the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name is Oliver and I'm a recovering addict. We have an action-packed episode planned for you today, and the first part of the episode will be, as usual, a reading. And today we're going to be reading from the AA Alcoholics Anonymous Daily Reflection book. We also have a bit of a discussion planned on relapse. So, what to do before it happens, and all things about relapse, a little bit of information to perhaps help you avoid it if you can. That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? Something that happens inevitably sometimes. So we'll talk about that. But first, of course, daily meditation, daily reflection. Nothing grows in the dark, October the 21st. We will want the good that is in us all, even in the worst of us, to flower and to grow. As Bill sees it, page 10. With the self-discipline and insight gained from practicing step 10, I begin to know the gratifications of sobriety, not as mere abstinence from alcohol, but as recovery in every department of my life. I renew hope, regenerate faith, and regain the dignity of self-respect. I discover the word "and" in the phrase "and when we were wrong," promptly admitted it. Reassured that I am no longer always wrong, I learn to accept myself as I am, with a new sense of the miracles of sobriety and serenity. What does that bring up for you? For me, I think about how, as I continue in my recovery, I'm growing, and all the good things about me and inside me are growing. Talks about self-discipline. It takes a lot of self-discipline to admit that we were wrong, and to surrender and say, hey, I was wrong. I have experienced times where I have admitted my fault in things, and over the course of my recovery, I've been able to actually almost immediately see that I had been wrong, or even in advance to think ahead before I act and before I speak, and to realize what I was about to do was wrong, and to avoid it altogether. It says that, well, of course, recovery is about abstaining from the drinking or the drugs, whatever your addiction is. That's the step one. That's the beginning of the recovery, but there's so much more. We can recover in terms of changing our behavior and all aspects of our life. That's more than just not drinking, more than just not using, more than just those old behaviors. It actually becomes so much more than that. It says that we were no longer always wrong, and that is the beginning of it for me. Is that, sometimes even in recovery, I can be wrong, but I can promptly admit it and make the amends where needed. But also I can modify my behavior so that as I learn to grow in recovery, I'm actually wrong less often. That's something that I can relate to. When I was using I was probably always wrong. In my mind, I was always right, but that's the nature of addiction, is that I wasn't really seeing things clearly. My actions and my motives are so much more pure and correct. They're right. I'm not seeking to benefit off others. I'm not manipulating. I do things for other people without expecting anything in return. I couldn't possibly say that when I was in active addiction, I went and looked after someone or visited someone in hospital, and I do these things today. I'm able to, in fact, the other day I went to a hospital and sat with a friend while they were receiving chemotherapy, not so that I could get some reward or say, well, I'm a good person for doing that, but just simply because I love that person and I wanted to just be there for them in whatever way I could. Another thing that I do without expectation of gain is something that has been mentioned in this program before, H&I, hospitals and institutions, where I go into a treatment centre and share my experience to the people there, the clients, the patients. And I can tell you now that some of the guests I've had on this show, I actually presented H&I to and are now celebrating years of clean time. I didn't expect that to happen. I just did it because somebody did it for me. And that's how these 12-step fellowships work. So as I continue in my recovery and continue to practice what was mentioned, the step 10, where I assess my part in things that I do, sometimes even ahead of time, I actually grow in recovery, and that's where all that groundbreaking work is done, where the things that I've learned and behaviours of addiction are slowly dismantled, and it's when my life begins to become fantastic. That brings us to the next topic, relapse. I was looking online to try and find some statistics and studies about relapse and what the percentage of people seeking treatment for addiction is that actually relapse. And I came upon some interesting information from www.drugabuse.gov. Some of which I actually already knew, and some of which is very, very parallel to what I've been taught and what I've heard in the fellowship of NA and AA. We'll talk about that after this brief message.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. Like what you hear? Then visit us at www.rehab.melbourne for more shows.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast. We were talking about relapse. From www.drugabuse.gov. I'm looking at something that says, can addiction be treated successfully? Yes, addiction is a treatable disorder. Research on the science of addiction and the treatment of substance use disorders has led to the development of research-based methods that help people to stop using drugs and resume productive lives, also known as being in recovery. Can addiction be cured? Sometimes, for me personally, I do hear people say, are you cured? If I was cured, I'd be able to have that one drug or one drink. And I know from my own personal experience that that's absolutely impossible for me. There are people in my life that can do that, and that behavior absolutely baffles me. I don't know how they do it. I tried to regulate my use for so many years, and it was just impossible. I was so over trying to play that game of moderation and thinking that I was in control, and it is just not possible for me. Do you think that that's possible for you? And I think part of the manifestation and beginning of a relapse in a major way is where the person who's relapsing is thinking that, yeah, I can just have one. Or, I can try a different substance to the one that brought me to my knees. Maybe it'll be different. I can tell you personally that I tried that game lots of times before I came into this recovery, and I was never able to sustain any amount of abstinence. Can addiction be cured? Like other chronic diseases such as heart disease or asthma, treatment for drug addiction usually isn't a cure, but addiction can be managed successfully. Treatment enables people to counteract addiction's disruptive effects on their brain and behaviour and regain control of their lives. So this website is very much agreeing with what I have found from personal experience. And I'm looking at brain scans of a healthy person, someone who's used a drug for 14 months, someone who has been 1 month abstinent and then 14 months abstinent. And I'm looking at the scan of the person who's 14 months abstinent and the person who's a healthy person. I'm going to assume that that's someone who doesn't use drugs or isn't an addict, isn't suffering from addiction and hasn't. And they look more or less identical. These images showing the density of dopamine transporters in the brain illustrate the brain's remarkable ability to recover, at least in part, after a long abstinence from drugs. I'm not going to tell you what the drug is in this case, doesn't even matter. So does relapse to drug use mean treatment has failed? This was what I wanted to talk about. And the study on this website says no. The chronic nature of addiction means that for some people, relapse or a return to drug use after an attempt to stop can be part of the process. But newer treatments are designed to help with relapse prevention. Relapse rates for drug use are similar to relapse rates for other chronic medical illnesses. If people stop following their medical treatment plan, they are likely to relapse. And that is where I want to stop reading that and talk about why people relapse. I've sat in meetings and I have heard people coming back from a relapse who are absolutely broken. People who were previously, as I'd known them, happy, perhaps struggling a little bit, but overall enjoying their life. They were enjoying the external things that recovery brings. That security of having somewhere to live, having food on the table, living a life, having healthy relationships, and then they come back after a relapse and they're absolutely baffled of what caused them to relapse. And from my experience of what I've heard countless times, to say that I'm qualified to say this, in my opinion, I am, because I've been to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meetings, and I've heard hundreds of people share their experience about this, that all of a sudden they just found that they relapsed. And it's always a similar explanation, is that it seemed to come out of nowhere. as it says on that website, if people stop following their medical treatment plan, they are likely to relapse. Now, we can just cross out the word medical in there and just say if people stop following their treatment plan, they are likely to relapse. If people stop doing the things that they're doing in order to maintain their recovery, they're likely to relapse. And for me, my treatment plan is very, very simple, and it's worked for me since day one. The first part of my treatment plan is attending regular meetings. When I attend regular meetings, I can hear from other people who are in recovery who have experienced and are experiencing the same thing as me, and I can hear what they do to make it work for them, to make their recovery work, to stay in recovery, to avoid difficulty. I get to hear people's experience, strength and hope, and it fills me with hope that there is a way through this. And when I was using, I never thought there was a way out. I thought that was it, that I was going to be using for the rest of my life. The second part of my treatment plan is routine. Without routine, I'm left to my own devices. I'm stuck inside my head, and my head can quickly become a pretty nasty place to hang out. So that routine for me is a daily walk, daily meditation. It's actually become creating episodes of this podcast every day, and I get to talk about recovery, and it's almost like sharing. So that has become part of my routine, and it's helping me immensely. You guys listening are helping me because I get to think about what I'm going to do for my recovery today. We've talked about meetings, connection with other people, routine. There's lots of other things. What are some of the things that you're doing for your recovery today? Hobbies are huge. We've talked about hobbies, actually. I have a great many hobbies, passions that I do to fill my day up and make me get out of myself. There's many different ways to treat addiction, and if relapse does happen, which it does for many people, we've heard that it does not mean that the treatment has failed. It means that if I relapse, perhaps I need to adjust my treatment plan. Perhaps I need to do more. And I'm grateful, extremely grateful to say that since I've entered the rooms of NA that I haven't relapsed. And to be honest, I would rather just adjust my treatment plan and make that increased before I relapse, because I can't afford to go through that merry-go-round all over again. I'm just enjoying my life far too much to bother with that. And I hope that my listeners, through listening to me share my experience and my guests as well, can get an insight into what a joy being in recovery is, and that as they continue to grow in their recovery, they rebuild their lives and their relationships, and just learn to be a productive member of society. It's possible, no matter how bad things were, to rebuild your life. And keep listening to these episodes, and you'll be able to see how it happens. You'll be able to hear from people and hear how to do that and how they've done it, what worked for them, what didn't. Let's learn and grow together. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time on the Recovery Cast.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.